What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here. Today we're going to do a getting started with Genesis Premium. And so we've had YouTubers over the past few weeks talking about transitioning from what was V-Era standard into Premium. And, good examples are Fenrir Vanguard, Solemn Vanguard, DifferentFight. And I've done actually ones for Grand Blue and Aqua Force, but today I'm actually going to do for Genesis. I actually got a lot of feedback that people wanted to see this actually. So here we go again. So starting off with the decks that you've played in V-Era, there are three types that I'm going to focus on in today's video. We're going to have Fenrir, we're going to have Regalia, and we're going to have Valkerion. So if you guys already played those standard versions of those decks, then all you have to do is slap on a G-Zone, and I'll cover some of those key aspects too. And so going into Premium, what is the winning image for Genesis? And honestly, there's a lot of things that are changing in G-Era, that change going into G-Era. For example, we have the stand trigger as in Taro, and we have the new Premium Collection Stride from 2020, Murdoch. And so what these cards do really change the whole dynamic of Genesis, almost change it in its identity in a way. And so what Murdoch even does is that basically it's a stride that you can do during the battle phase, regardless of your opponent's grade. And some of you are like, wait, what? Are you serious? So your opponent can be at grade 2 or even grade stuck at grade 1, and as long as you get to grade 3, you have that Counter Blast and that Soul Blast 6, you can stride during the battle phase and have triple drive. And if you have like cards like Himiko as your Vanguard, you can pass on the triggers too. It gains the crits and the power, and it's just like, wait, what? So it just changes your grade 3 turn entirely. So there is no subpar grade 3 turn in that sense too. With the Taro, this card enables a couple of things. And so, for example, its skill, it's when it's Soul Blasted, you can choose one of your regards and stand it. And so this is vital when you do it during the battle phase. And so what that means is that if you have a unit that Soul Blasts, you can restand one of your regards. So you can have multi-attack with regards. And so as a whole, you can start seeing Genesis really having that impact on Pseudo Stride, or not Pseudo Stride, but Stride into the battle phase regardless of the opponent's grade. We can restand regards, and then if you have Regalia, we have the Minerva Stride, which also is a restander on her own, but Regalia got in the card of a sense of Norn that actually restands any Regalia units. It's just kind of crazy at that point. So this is really designing over that overview. And so the biggest thing is that you have multi-attack with Vanguards, with regards that have the critical 2, thanks to the Force Marker 2. And so with that being in mind, you can have big beaters with high crit pressure and high numbers that really put in that lethal damage and actually winning you the game. And so that's how it goes. So now covering into the pros and cons of Premium Genesis. So one of the pros that I really like about it, just like I mentioned, we can stride regardless of the opponent's grade. It's very powerful. Not only that, but we have access to G-Guards that enable us to soul charge from the drop zone. So this is something that is useful in resource management. So we have units that Soul Blast, we have cards that use them as divine gauges. So being able to G-Guard and also have the benefit of actually soul charging is like a 2-for-1 special, really. And honestly, things like that I appreciate about the deck. And also going into, we have phenomenal strand triggers. Like I said, Taro is one of them. We have Dreaming Dragon that actually recycles our deck again. So all the cards in your drop zone go back to your deck. And if you have 10 or more, you can draw 1 card. And it goes back to deck too as well. So you can potentially see it on a draw or even a drive check and stand something. And then lastly, we have access to a Pseudo Denial Griffin play. But if this is only access through the Fenrir build. And so that actually, I'll go more into depth once I get to the Fenrir build. And some of the cons really with the whole clan is that it still needs to have some generated advantage. It kind of struggles sometimes with having enough hand size, and it needs its key pieces to execute its winning image though. Genesis in the Regalia round, actually, if they pull off their first stride turn, they are able to get 7 drive checks, which can generate advantage, and it's much easier for that deck to generate 7 advantage, and it's almost standalone at that point. But all the other builds still struggle with that, so you need those key pieces to give you advantage to maintain, and then also cards to be able to return advantages, such as Ulysses, for example. So those cons are still there, and that really hasn't changed as much. And also just be wary of your deck out. Unless you are playing the Dreaming Dragon, you can easily deck out much quicker because you have triple drive, you're soul charging a lot more quicker in some of these decks. So you have to practice and find your stopping point really, and then also just be resourceful with that too. And that's where even G-Guards being able to soul charge from the drop can help with that, so you don't have to soul charge aggressively from the deck, for example. So onto the main strides, really you're going to have at least 2 copies of Murdoch. Again, he's the one that is able to strike through in the battle phase. We have Amaruta here, which is very unique. She came in Premium Collection 2019, and what she does is that one of her main skills is Counterblast, one flip of anything in the G zone. You can give plus 10k and a crit to her rear guard, and that's actually very powerful. And that's when, honestly, some of the V era decks incorporating the G zone that kind of just like took advantage of that. So if you have like a Wise Man, for example, and now we have access to Gleipnir, you can have a big beater that get additional 10k and a critical, and then you can use the Force 1 or Force 2 marker appropriately to be a threatening beater at that point. And then the other skill is basically if you, at the end of the battle, if you can Soul Blast 15 cards, then you can restand, and then your opponent can't use Sentinels for the rest of the turn. If you can pull that off, that's great. Once in a while, you can, but it's not really the go-to play. In fact, that we just have other strides and different turns that actually just better off with much more greater threatening, but it's still there just in case, and you could probably make a mean deck if you really want to take advantage of that skill, but mostly it's the other one that can give you a plus 10k in the crit and also potential draw and soul charge 5 as well. And then for Regalia, you definitely need a Minerva for sure. In fact, I recommend playing 4. Minerva is the one that you're able to Soul Blast 3, you get an extra drive check, and then of course it's GB3 skill. When it attacks, you can pay the cost, discard a card, Soul Blast 6 Regalia, and then at the end of the battle, you can restand all of your Regalia units, and that is powerful. You can get a lot of attacks. I did in my Regalia deck profile where you can actually get up to 9 attacks with the Norns behind in the back row, and it's just really nutty at that point. And so these are some of the key strides, especially Murdoch and Amaruta for any Genesis variant, and if you're playing Regalia, you definitely want to get the Minerva. Now moving to the great to have cards, like these are the cards that are really nice to have, but most of the time you fall back to the ones that I just mentioned too. So we'll start out with Muspo over here. It's a Regalia Stripe, but it doesn't require the Regalia Heart. So you can Soul Blast any number of cards, but if you Soul Blast 3 or more, you can actually have the option to draw a card or countercharge. And that may come up depending if you are damage denied and you need to Soul Blast or can't even use your soul as a resource to be able to do that. This is something that I mentioned in Regalia too, that you can take advantage to be able to get the Divine Gauge for Norn if you really need that counterblast and still have a restanding Vanguard turn. And also she flips anything in the G zone, so that helps with flipping too as well. And then she gives rear guards plus 4k for each card Soul Blasted too. So it buffs up your field a little bit too, just to have some additional pressure. And then we have here in the second card is in Tyr. Tyr is a old school card back to like when we have fighters collections. Yeah, it's been a while. And it really has a Soul Blast skill where you can basically reveal, when your drive check reveals a grade 1 or greater, you can soul charge 3. And really what that helps is that you're either getting a trigger or you're soul charging. And it helps too because it doesn't require any counterblast, so it's another strat that allows you to soul charge without the need of a counterblast. And I don't use this as often, but it's definitely one of those cards that you can use this to fall back to. And then over here, we have Ultima. And Ultima is pretty up there. Don't get me wrong, I highly hope that Bushiroad makes reprints for the Ultimate Stride Dragons. I think everybody will like that. That makes it a little more affordable for people to pick up. And Ultima is one of those great to have cards that you can fall back to because you can Counterblast 2 Ultimate Stride. You can grab 4 cards from your deck and actually call 2 and then stack 2. And normally you would call specific riggers to make your setup formation really solid, and then you have 2 critical triggers just waiting to be drive checked. And then when you drive check any triggers, that trigger applies to every unit on your board, and so your columns become instantly plus 20k when you drive check a trigger, and then they all become extra critical. So ultimately with Ultima, each column is going to be swinging at least crit 3, and then that doesn't include force 2 markers, so you can go crit 4, and this is one of very solid turns that has power and high crit pressure. You can almost 0 to 6 damage people pretty often with Ultima 2. And if you're going to a regional, I do highly recommend picking up one. But if you're playing with your friends, then this is something that you don't have to pick up right away. You can still rely on the main strides, where the main strides are a lot more affordable. Don't get me wrong. But I just wanted to mention Ultima because Ultima is still a great card. And even in Regalia, you can actually restand Ultima and get 5 drive checks, and it just, yeah, very nutty turn at that point. I think you get my point. Now to the G-Guards. Just like I mentioned, our G-Guards actually soul charge. So Ear is a phenomenal card. You can soul charge cards of different grades in your drop zone. So if you have a grade 0, a grade 1, a grade 2, and a grade 3, you can soul charge all 4. It soul charges up to 4 cards, and if you do those different grades, it gets the plus 5 that you done with the first 2, and then an additional 10k, so it becomes a 30k shield. Very solid, and then this can give you a lot of resources that you need. It can get you Taros, and can get you the Gouges for Fenrir. It can get your Regalia units in Regalia, and many more more pieces that you may need at that point. So it's just very useful card at that point. And then going into Iris, she is an OG guard from like the Fighters collection as well, but she is the one that, you know, you do the skill, you get plus 5k shield, so it's a 20k shield, but she can still charge any 3 cards if you're choosing from the drop zone, so that's very powerful. And honestly, most decks, especially Strides, they typically have a Soul Blast 3 or Soul Blast 6 cost, so it helps mitigate either the whole cost or at least half the cost, and that can be vital with your plays. And then we have Laura over here. She is the GB1 flip card that honestly helps us with not deck out a little bit longer. So for example, you can return cards of the same grade that are units, not triggers, to your deck from either your soul or your drop. I recommend doing it from the drop, so that way you still have resources in the soul. But this allows you to return 3 cards back to the deck, so it kind of gives you an extra drive check in a sense, and give you a little more flexibility and be able to drive check in that turn if you're really close to deck out, or just getting some key pieces back into the deck that you honestly want to see whether they come in your hand or soul charge at that point, or you have other cards that can grab cards from soul, just like Gleipnir, for example. And these are phenomenal G-Guards, so I definitely recommend, where you can get 2 Ear, you can get 2 Iris, and 1 at least Laura for sure. And there's some other G-Guards that you could always pick up, but these are the main ones that I definitely wanted to highlight. Now this is the fun part, where we actually take those 3 variants and actually start plopping them into premium. So Regalia specifically, just like I mentioned, we have Minerva, it restands, and then we have the new Angelica coming out into Clan Selection Plus, where you can ride it as Vanguard, and it gives you immunity to your reguards as well, and that can be very important in retire removal clans, for example, like aggro and so many more. And we have the Idrisil from the prior set that we have access to that could fetch the Norn, so that's very vital. So these grade 3s are mandatory in my opinion, so that way with Idrisil you can guarantee that Norn and set it up behind the Vanguard, and then you can accumulate Norns behind the background and really restand reguards, restand Vanguards, and really take advantage of that. And honestly, the first stride turn is very impactful, where if you stride Minerva, you have the Soul Blast 3 skill to get a drive check. So your first attack as a Vanguard would be 4 drive checks. Norm will reduce it to 3 drive checks, and so you'll see 7 drive checks in total. It's very powerful, especially when you put a force 2 marker on the Vanguard circle, and then of course your reguards would just follow suit, and you can distribute the triggers onto those reguards, because Minerva is honestly going to swing 48k by default with her skill and Norn's skill, and then anything additional would just power it up at that point. So it's very, very threatening at that point. And if you played Himiko Idrisil, this is where you can change Himiko into Angelica. You could incorporate Himiko as your Vanguard too, because what's cool about Minerva is that it doesn't require the heart to be Regalia. It just needs to Soul Blast Regalia, and so you can play with that. I have not tried that. I just wanted the consistency of more of a Regalia pure base build, so I didn't have to worry about that. And then there's other cards. I have a deck profile too that I'll put in the description so you guys can see that too, much more in depth. But it's a very powerhouse turn that really makes that Vanguard centric feeling, but also with the work of your reguards too, and it has like that complete package that honestly, it's one of my favorite Genesis decks, and it's actually just fun. Now to Fenrir. So a lot of people either like this deck or they do not like this deck, and the reason is because of the meta game. So Fenrir is a very powerful deck. It's honestly one of the top decks of the meta game too, for real. And what makes it so powerful is the consistency of Fenrir that has. It can fetch all these pieces that it needs. You can get Gleipnir, for example. You can get the Gouges really set up for your soul, as you're soul charging massively with other cards. You can get cards like Kroot to soul charge 6 massively. And what all that means is that when you're able to do your setup turn, you put Gleipnir on your force 2 marker, beef up the Gleipnir with the Gouge over here, because Gouge has the skill where if it's in the soul, if you have a Fenrir Vanguard, it's actually a 2-part skill, so you can actually put it on the bottom of the deck and actually give something plus 3k. But if you have Fenrir, then it gets an additional plus 3k to any other unit or reguard, and then you soul charge 2, so you can basically plus 6k on the Gleipnir and soul charge 2, and further dig into your pieces, where you can put Tauros into your soul as soon as you're right to grade 3, go into your Pseudo strike with Murdoch and actually enable GV1, and then when you attack with Gleipnir, you can soul blast the Tauros that you soul charge to restand it, and it gets stronger and stronger, because every time it's soul blast, it gets plus 10k. And it's absurd because your opponent's at grade 2, so if your opponent gives you the counter blast, it pretty much means death for them. And there's players that have played the infinite power loop with the witches. There's players like me and Zed that actually play more of the early aggro game, so we don't rely on the infinite power loop. So it's really one way or the other. But most of the time, if they give you the counterblast, then it's like instant death. It's just that powerful. And not only that, let's talk about the Pseudo Denial Griffin that I was actually mentioning earlier. So what is the Pseudo Denial Griffin? And so what it means is a defensive G-Guard play where you can actually just retire one of your opponent's rearguards during their battle phase, and that could really wreck somebody's battle formation, winning image turn. Like, it's just detrimental. And so how this even works is the two cards next to Fenrir. We have Vanagander and the PG Sentinel like card from like ages ago. It's Secret Elsie, for example, and what she does is that when she's placed on Guardian Circle, you can Soul Blast any number of cards from your soul, and then you call cards from the top of the deck to that equal amount. Now, why is that important? Well, a card like Vanagander, when it's actually placed onto Rearguard Circle or Vanguard Circle, you can Soul Blast one and retire a unit, and of course, if it was on Vanguard, you can retire the whole board. But the key thing is that when it's on Rearguard Circle, you can pop a card. So it's like, okay, so where's this going? And so that's where Fenrir's skill, when it sees a unit that it's Soul Blasted, this is not only during your turn. It can be either player's turn. And so when it sees Vanagander being Soul Blasted by Secret Elsie from the Soul, you can Counter Blast one, revive the Vanagander, and then Soul Blast one again for Vanagander to retire the unit. And that's how that Pseudo Denial Griffin play works. And it's very effective, especially if vital sometimes in the mirror match, because this deck is scary. But it's just one of those utilities that we have access to, and I just wanted to mention it with Fenrir. Lastly, we have Valkerion, and so this is awesome. It's more of a fun deck for sure. I had the pleasure to talk to AFKHobby, who's actually top with this in the premium format for Vision tournaments. You can check that out in my videos too in the description as well. And what's really cool with this deck is that you can play 12 stands in here to take advantage of Valkerion. And Valkerion acts as a rearguard, and so stand triggers can stand any rearguard, so you can re-stand the Valkerion. And Valkerion is a very 70k based beater. You put a force 2 marker on it, it's very threatening, and you have the origin deity Uranus over here actually being able to restand it. But not only that, because you have access to Taro, you can Soul Blast it with cards like Leiknir to restand the Valkerion and get more attacks at that point. And then what's cool with Valkerion is that when it attacks, it soul charges those triggers into the soul. So if you drive track a Taro, you stand the Valkerion, and then that Taro goes into soul, and it's just like, what? You get to double dip in a sense. And so you have this 70k plus crit to at least rearguard swinging for multiple attacks, and it's similar to what Fenrir's trying to accomplish. It's just that we have Valkerion over here with the Astro Poets, and so if you like that deck and you have it, this is something that you can implement and really be a force to be reckoned with. And honestly, it's just like, you gotta learn how to play it well, and if you do, it can really give you the benefit of actually winning some games. And so yeah. So if you guys want to dive down more into the deck profiles themselves, I actually have multiple deck profiles on my channel. I'll put them all in the description. I even have the interview with AFKHobby with the Valkerion build too, so that you guys want to check that out if you guys like reading blogs, for example. And honestly, Genesis is in a really good place with all this premium collection and all the intricacies that we got from like the sets in V era, with pairing up with the G era cards that we still have, like Taro, for example. And it's just really a fun clan to play though, and it just has a lot of different styles that you can still kind of go to and have a different feel. As you can see, we have like waifus, we have gods, we have like these deities. Like, it's just like that mythology Norse kind of like type of feel aesthetic. And if you like that, that's definitely something that you guys can check out for real. And you know, quick announcement, not sure if you guys have checked, but if you see the bottom over here, we are officially partnered with TCGplayer. And so just for those who don't know who TCGplayer is, it's a platform where you can actually buy cards and accessories that you want for any card game. For me, honestly, 95% of my purchases to get my own cards for this channel, or even for playing with friends, actually come from TCGplayer. I've always had a very good experience with them, and even had those customer service calls that I had, or messages that I had to do, but they were always receptive on that and actually helped me out with either getting a refund or getting something replaced. But the point is, they have excellent customer service, and they have cards that you can actually get to do whatever you want. You want to play with them, or you want to show them off for your videos. So I definitely highly recommend them. And if you want to support the channel, I have the affiliated link down below, so you can click on it. And so if you were going to buy cards anyway from TCGplayer, I would just appreciate it if you click on that link, so that way it helps the channel. And ultimately, what I want the channel to become is something that I can do more stuff. I can do more giveaways. I can do like more openings that I want to actually start doing. So for example, we're getting the new starter decks for overdress, and I like to actually start doing like openings so people can see that. And so if the channel starts to essentially help pay for itself at that point, then I could do more videos like that for you guys to actually enjoy. And so any help is appreciated. And also, I'm just excited to be partnered up with TCGplayer. So it's just very exciting, very cool. And again, amigos, you know, play test the deck, see what you like. You could always tweak it. You don't have to play the exact same builds that I have in this deck, this channel. So feel free to tweak it. You know, let me know what your experience is. I love to hear from you guys being as standard players going into the premium format and seeing, well, like, whoa, these combos are like just like, whoa. There's actually much more in-depthness in Genesis and premium than it is in standard, and it's just that level of stimulity that I appreciate as well. And so if you like the video, give it a like. If you want to comment and engage, feel free to comment down below. I love engaging with my peoples, so I do my best to reply to every comment that's out there too. And if you know any Genesis players that are actually interested in premium or just have an interest of like transitioning from standard to premium, just, you know, share the video with them too. And of course, subscribe. So see you, amigos. Bye.